This MAGA witness just sat there and watched Ilhan Omar humiliate herself.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Mr. Matowski, you've been with the State Department for 33 years, right?
Over 33 years, yes.
Oh, wonderful. Has it been typical for more than 100 people to sign dissent memos on a given policy?
That would be atypical, I think.
Atypical. Has it been typical for policy to drive several SOs to publicly resign in protest?
There have been Foreign Service officers who've resigned in the past over various policies. That's true.
In June of 2017, between the second and the third version of the Muslim ban, more than 100 diplomats signed a dissent memo that said, quote, banning travelers from these 7 countries calls back to some of the worst times in our history. Former consular officer Christopher Richards, who resigned in protest of the Muslim ban, said in an op-ed that the consular officers were not able to issue waivers on their own, that they had to get approval from the State Department. Would that be you? Do you give that approval?
No, that's not correct. The consular officers make the decision on the first 2 prongs of the waiver, national interest and undue hardship, and then the interagency security review provides the guidance on the security prong.
So that's not a decision you get to make, no. Or is the White House involved in that decision?
Not at all.
Okay. Sarah Gartner, another former FSO who resigned in protest over the Muslim ban, told CNN that fellow officers, quote, felt pressure to approve as few folks as possible for the waiver. She also said that the Muslim ban had been, quote, reworked and sanitized by layers of bureaucracy with people distracted by the next terrible thing. It can be easy to forget it's even happening. Well, it looks like Congress hasn't forgotten. And Madam Chair, I have assigned testimony from 4 former FSOs that I would like to enter into record.
It's put into the record by unanimous consent.
Thank you. Ambassador John Foley, who quit his post as ambassador to Panama in 2018, said he could no longer represent President Trump and still hold true to the value that make this country great. Among the policies he listed was the Muslim ban. In the end, how many diplomats and consular officers signed the dissent memo protesting the ban?
I don't have an exact number for you, Congresswoman. I know that some did.
Mm-hmm. Will you be able to get us that number?
I can't guess that number, no.
How do you respond to his claim that the consular officers have to get clear waivers with your office?
I would say, as I said before, that that's not correct. The consular officers make the determination on the first 2 prongs of the waiver, national interest and undue hardship, and the security check, as I testified, is conducted back here in Washington. Now, if a consular officer is...
So you're saying his claim is false?
Which claim? That Washington is making the decisions?
Yes.
Yes, that's not correct.
Mm-hmm. And how do you respond to Ms. Gartner's claim that the officers are implicitly or explicitly pressured to deny waivers?
We are not implicitly or explicitly pressuring anyone to act in any way contrary to the law.
Okay, and how do you respond to Ambassador Foley's claim, shared by all the people who signed the memo, that the ban is a betrayal of American values?
The ambassador is certainly entitled to his opinion on that. There are many, obviously it's very clear that this policy has many opponents, but fundamentally, it's designed to try to keep the United States safe.
And to our other 2 panelists, was Stephen Miller's role in formulating the 3 reiterations of the Muslim ban? What was his role?
I'm not aware of any role played by Stephen Miller.
Mm-hmm. And Ms. Newman?
I was not at the department in January. I did not start until late February.
Okay. And what instructions were DHS and state given from the White House as how to implement the Muslim ban?
I wasn't given any instruction from the White House.
Again, ma'am, I was not at the department in January 2017.
The department was not consulted about the first executive order.
The gentlelady's time has expired. We turn now to the gentleman from North Dakota, Mr. Armstrong.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Radikowski, sorry.
Ilhan Omar opens by building this long runway, laying out stats, resignations, op-eds, diplomats signing dissent memos, the whole buffet of bureaucratic resistance to the Trump administration's travel ban. She paints a picture of chaos in the ranks. Diplomats resigning, letters of protest circulating, bureaucrats whispering that the waiver process is a mess, people feeling pressured not to approve visas. It's the classic narrative. This policy is evil. Even the experts inside the government think it's evil. And honestly, if you weren't paying attention, if you didn't know how DC works, if you didn't understand how ideological the bureaucracy has become, you might buy it. But then Ramatowski steps in with this calm, steady, almost surgical tone. She asks him if diplomats had to get approval from him for waivers. He says, no, that's not correct. She suggests the White House might have been directly controlling the process. He says, not at all. She quotes an FSO saying officers were pressured to deny waivers. Ramatowski answers, with the coolness of a man who's been grilled by far scarier committees. We are not implicitly or explicitly pressuring anyone to act contrary to the law. Omar asks if the claim that Washington was making the decisions is false. He says flatly, yes, that's not correct. He doesn't attack anyone. He doesn't editorialize. He doesn't grandstand. He just stands there as 33 years of institutional memory in a suit, pushing back on a narrative that he knows is exaggerated, political, and designed for maximum outrage. But here, where it gets really telling. When Omar reads Ambassador John Feely's claim that the Muslim ban was a betrayal of American values, Ramatowski doesn't bite. He refuses to validate the emotional argument. He simply says, the ambassador is entitled to his opinion, but the policy is fundamentally designed to keep the United States safe. That's it. That's the whole dividing line in American politics right there. One side argues from feelings, symbolism, moral posturing. The other argues from national security, responsibility, and actual policy mechanics. See, what Omar is doing is classic political stagecraft. She's framing every bureaucrat who disagreed with Trump as a whistleblower, a hero, a martyr of the resistance. In reality, anyone who's worked around DC knows that the State Department leans heavily left, heavily globalist, and heavily allergic to strong immigration enforcement. 100 dissent signatures. That's a Tuesday in Foggy Bottom. People resigning over policy differences. Happens all the time. But suddenly, it's some act of moral courage when the policy belongs to a president they don't like. But here's the bigger issue. Omar tries to prove that the travel ban was a racist, anti-Muslim crusade. Ramatowski calmly shows that the waiver system isn't political, isn't White House controlled, isn't manipulated behind the scenes. Every allegation she throws, he dismantles. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. Just factually. And honestly. That's probably why this exchange never went viral. Because quiet competence isn't clickbait. This hearing wasn't just about Trump. It wasn't just about Omar. It wasn't even just about the travel ban. This was about who actually runs America. Is it elected officials who make policy? Or is it unelected career bureaucrats who decide which policies they'll implement and which ones they'll resist? When Omar highlights dissent memos like they're sacred documents, understand what she's actually defending. A system where bureaucrats get to veto the will of voters. When Ramatowski says the system wasn't politicized, what he's defending is the principle that the executive branch, regardless of who sits in the Oval Office, gets to set foreign policy. And whether you lean right or left, that matters. Because if bureaucrats can pick and choose which policies they obey, democracy isn't democracy anymore. It's a suggestion box. The travel ban debate was bigger than the ban. It was about whether America has the right to defend its borders, screen who comes into the country, and set security policies based on risk rather than ideology. Omar framed it as a moral failing. Ramatosky framed it as national security. Guess which one actually keeps Americans safe? This exchange, even years later, is a snapshot of the American divide. One side sees borders as barriers. The other sees borders as safeguards. One side sees dissent inside the bureaucracy as righteous rebellion. The other sees it as sabotage of elected leadership. One side wants policies judged by feelings. The other wants them judged by outcomes. And that's why this hearing still matters. Because the debate never ended. It just moved to new arenas: the border crisis, refugee programs, emergency vetting, security screenings. Every time we argue about immigration, we are really arguing about the same question Ramatosky answered on that day. Does the United States have the right to protect its citizens, even if it offends the global elite, activist groups, and media narratives? Ramatosky's answer was yes. Calm, firm, unapologetic. And honestly, that's the kind of clarity we could use a whole lot more of in today's politics. If you found this breakdown helpful, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. See you in the next one.